Good morning, stakeholders, and welcome to the Office of Procurement's Regulation Procurement in Action Series, Session 2, Market Research Report and Analysis. I am Tamara Roy, Head Corporate Communications, and we are extremely pleased that you're able to participate in today's session. The team who will be presenting today will be the Head of Procurement Policy Development, Ms. Pastora Brown, our Legal Policy Research Officer, Ms. Hafsa Suknanan, and Ms. Devika Singh, our Policy Officer. They will be joined also by our Head Property Disposal, Mrs. Joy Joseph Lara. Before we begin the formal aspects of today's proceedings, please allow me to go through some helpful tips for a successful session. Do note that your mics will be muted. Your questions during the session can be sent via the chat option on the Teams platform. These questions will be collated by our team and addressed in our question and answer segment at the end of the session. Please keep your contributions helpful and be considerate to our presenters and other participants. At the end of today's session, you will be invited to provide your feedback. Feel free to help us improve future sessions to better match your needs by letting us know what worked well and what did not. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be shared via email and uploaded to our website. So without further delay, I will now ask Ms. Pastora Brown to introduce the sessions. Pastora.
Thank you, Tamara. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of the Office of Procurement Regulations Procurement in Action series. As we discussed last day, in this series of training sessions, we are focusing on the first stage of the public procurement proceedings, that is, the planning stage. So let me see how well you remember the details of last week's session. I have a question for you. According to Section 4 of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act 2015 as amended, can you tell me what are the 4 stages of the public procurement proceedings? That's correct. First, we have the planning stage, then the tendering stage, followed by evaluation and award of contract, and finally, contract management to close out. The Basic Procurement Handbook, which most of you would have already downloaded from the OPR's website, refers to 2 levels of procurement planning. Last week, in Module 1, we focused on strategic level planning. We examined the Ministry of Public Procurement's entire portfolio of procurement items for fiscal 2022. And we discussed some key tools that we can use to analyze the portfolio of items when we are developing our annual procurement plan. Can you remind me of what those tools are so I can hear you ticking them off? First of all, we would have just mentioned the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, as well as the PESTLE, political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. But we actually delved into the Pareto analysis, Porter's 5 forces, the Kraljic matrix, the supplier preferencing model, as well as the supplier positioning model. You will remember those. When you check your email, you will see that we provided you with model answers to each of the tools. We also included some bullet points that will give you an idea of the rich discussions we would have had amongst ourselves during our analysis of the Ministry of Public Procurement's procurement portfolio. So, in today's session, my colleagues, Ms. Hafsa Suknanan, followed by Ms. Devika Singh, will move the discussion forward to the next level of the public procurement planning that we see in the basic procurement handbook. And who can tell me what that level is called? That's right, the operational level. So first we looked at the strategic level planning. Today we focus our attention on operational level planning for public procurement, where the focus shifts from planning for the entire fiscal to planning for each individual procurement activity that the Ministry of Public Procurement intends to undertake during the fiscal. So before these ladies join us, I would like to discuss something very important with you. When we reviewed your feedback from the last session, we noticed that some of you had a really great idea. Apparently, as you were working together in your groups, you began to recognize the value of networking with your colleagues from other public bodies, and that is just fantastic. So, on our end, what we will try to do to the extent that it is possible is for each of the sessions, we will place you into the same group that you were in before. So when you get into your breakout room, we want to encourage you to open your mics and to take the time to get to know each other as you work together on the assignment. We also want to encourage you to continue to network and to work together during the series of training workshops and beyond, even after we have completed the series. By now, you would have recognized that public procurement is not a one-man show. The best way to plan and execute your procurement projects in order to promote the objects of the Act is to work together towards that end. So while the Office of Procurement Regulation continues to provide you with a number of key resources to assist you in that regard, you as colleagues within the public bodies can also work together to build public procurement capacity in Trinidad and Tobago. So without further ado, I want to remind you of a few of the resources we have provided for you to work with in today's session. I would have already mentioned the sample responses to the planning tools from last week's session. And for today, we would have emailed you as well the case study along with the assignment that you will be working on in your breakout rooms. We also would have emailed to you the market research report template that you are to complete as part of your assignment. Please note, and this is very important, please note that these items were sent to you via email, and we will not be trying to share them via the chat function in Microsoft Teams. In that way, we hope to save time with any technological issues like the ones we would have had last time. So in that regard, if you have not already done so, when we call a break during the presentations, please take the time to access the documents, print the files, and/or save them onto your computers so that you will have them to work with during the breakout session. And just one final thing before I leave you, Tamara would also have given you that hint. We wanted to let you know that today we have a very special surprise for you. We have been focusing on planning for the procurement of goods, works, and services that you need to get our jobs done or your jobs done. However, today we have with us Mrs. Joy Joseph Lara, who is the head disposal of public property at the OPR. Mrs. Joseph Lara will be sharing with you how you can use the same tools that you use to plan your procurements to also plan your disposal of public property projects. So stay tuned and listen out for Joy during the course of this morning's session. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your kind attention as I now hand you over to Hafsa.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for session 2 we are going to go through market research and analysis, which is part of the planning phase of public procurement. On the slide, you can see the topics we will cover in today's session. And this comprises of the what, the who, the where, the why, and the how of market research and analysis. This also includes a guided practical for completing your market research report, and as Pastora mentioned, a special segment on market research and analysis as it relates to disposal of public property. Hopefully, by the end of today's session, you will have a clear understanding of market research and analysis, and you will be able to complete your market research report for your individual procurement and disposal activities. Last week, in session 1 of our Procurement in Action training series, we looked at the annual procurement planning process, and we discussed the importance of procurement planning. Today's session is on market research and analysis, but before we jump right into our specific topic, I want to slip in where we get this planning phase from, and Pastora touched on it in her introduction. On the slide, you will see the stages of the public procurement process, as defined in Section 4 of the Act. This states procurement proceedings in relation to public procurement includes the process of procurement from the planning stage, the listing of tenders, awarding of contracts, and contract management to the formal acknowledgement of completion of the contract. In essence, public procurement under Trinidad and Tobago's new legislation will be a holistic approach to acquiring goods, works, and services, and will span from the initial planning stage to contract closure. So here we have a visual representation of that part of Section 4 of the Act with some more detail. As you know, this Procurement in Action training series focuses on the planning stage, as it is the most important stage because it feeds into the remaining 3 stages of the public procurement procedure. In advance of today's topic, I just want to take the time to make the procurement planning point on this slide, which Pastora already touched on in her introduction. So, procurement planning takes place on 2 levels, the strategic level and the operational level. In session 1, we talked about the annual procurement planning process, and having gone through the high-level planning and portfolio analysis, I'm sure you can see the strategic element. Now, in today's session, we will be looking at the operational level of procurement planning, and this is where you plan for your individual procurement activities. So, earlier, we identified the 4 stages of the public procurement process. And on this slide, you have the 16 stages of the procurement cycle. Of course, the procurement cycle is more in-depth than the 4 stages we just went through. It is more of a step-by-step of the what and when in conducting your individual procurement activities. Are you wondering where market research and analysis falls in the procurement cycle? Actually, market research and analysis feeds into your procurement strategy. So, it is undertaken at the very start, and the output can be seen and used in a few of the steps. For more information, you can check out our basic handbook, and we will send a link in the chat. So, which steps of the cycle? On this slide, you will see that market research and analysis feeds into step 1, step 2, and step 5 of the procurement cycle. At step 1, market research and analysis will help you to refine your needs. At step 2, it gives you the opportunity to justify your proposed course of action. And at step 5, it provides information that can assist you in preparing your solicitation documents. Now, I just want to say that in some cases, the market research report is prepared and submitted with the purchase requisition. But this is not a rule, and it would depend on the organization's processes. Now, we get into the meat of the matter. What is market research? On this slide, you can see what market research is all about. And basically, the purpose of market research is to gather data on commercial products and services to determine their availability. It is also about getting a knowledge of market prices, practices, and standards. Basically, any factor which might have an effect on the procurement requirements and process. Knowledge about the market is a crucial step in a successful procurement process. And as we go through the discussions today, I hope you will also see the practical benefits of undertaking market research and analysis. So, now that we know what market research and analysis is about, the next question is, who is supposed to conduct market research and analysis, or who should complete the market research report that we have been mentioning? Here are some options, and I would like you to let me know in the chat which of the options or combination of the options you think is the correct response. Would it be the technical expert, the end user, the requisitioner, or possibly the procurement unit? The reality is, it is not about who is filling out the paperwork, but rather whose input would give the most productive response to move the procurement forward. Ideally, this would be the requesting unit's responsibility. That being said, let's consider this scenario. Would it be wise to have the Administrative Officer 5 at head office conduct the market research for a water pump? In many ministries, GA is mainly responsible for procurement. So perhaps it is felt that if GA has to buy the item, then it is out of the hands of the requisitioner. In the circumstances of this scenario, the requisitioner would be facilities management. But what if there's no facilities management staff and the end user is a center coordinator in a remote location running a district office? Depending on what is being procured, including factors like supply, would be the requesting unit's responsibility to undertake market research and analysis. That being said, let's consider this scenario. Would it be wise to have the Administrative Officer 5 at head office conduct the market research for a water pump? In many ministries, GA is mainly responsible for procurement. Perhaps it is felt that if GA has to buy the item, then it is out of the hands of the requisitioner, who, in the best circumstance of this scenario, would be facilities management. But what if there is no facilities management staff and the end user is a center coordinator in a remote location running a district office? Depending on what is being procured, including factors like supply, value, strategic importance, and risk, the who can be any of the persons identified, or it may require a cross-functional team. The right answer is, who is in the best person to understand the needs in order to develop the requirements. And this decision has to be made within your organization. One last thing about who does the market research. If there is no internal staff with the capacity to undertake this activity, in such a circumstance, the public body may outsource this function. Outsourcing may entail seeking assistance from another public body, entering into an MOU, or even hiring a consultant. And if you wish to learn more about procurement capacity, you can check out the OPR's general guidelines on developing procurement capacity on the OPR's website. And we will send a link in the chat for you. Moving on, let's look at why we need to undertake market research and analysis. Essentially, we undertake market research because it supports sound decision-making. And this sound decision-making feeds into the development of your procurement strategy. In our upcoming sessions, we will go more into procurement strategy and all that it entails. For now, to summarize the information on this slide, market research and analysis reduces the risk of few offers being received. It encourages the revision of terms of reference or specifications. It can lead to the establishment of a roster of potential suppliers for future procurements. And, very importantly, it provides a path for moving public procurement from a transactional activity to a strategic one. Just a note, the items on this slide are by no means an exhaustive list, as there are many more reasons to undertake market research and analysis in procurement. So, here on this slide, we have sources of information that you can access when undertaking your market research. I'm sure most of you already know and utilize these frequently. On the left of the slide are the sources listed in the market research report template. And on the right side, we have the other category. In the other category, you can include any source which you researched, and the slide also gives you a few examples. Today, we will just touch on the request for information and manufacturer catalogs. Here we have request for information. And as you can see from the slide, a public body may issue a request for information in order to ascertain 1. Technical developments in the industry, 2. Supply availability, and 3. Cost estimates to aid in the determination of market prices. A couple of tips when it comes to going the route of an RFI. First, just remember that it should always be written as a non-binding inquiry. Second, an RFI is not a solicitation document. And last, I think you should check out the RFI templates on OPR's website. We will send a link in the chat now. So here we have manufacturer or product catalogs. One of the uses of market research is that it helps with writing the solicitation or requirements documentation. So we are saying that you can use product literature or manufacturer catalogs as part of your research. However, with this comes a warning. Do not take the technical specifications as per these sources and use it directly into your solicitation documents. Ideally, your requirements documentation should be both broad but also detailed enough to get what you need. It ought not to contain anything that is overly restricted and that might restrict competition, especially if there are a number of suppliers in the market. So, I was recently told a story, and I'm going to share that with you. There's a department in a company with a preference for a particular brand of safety boots. The preference is because these boots are considered stylish as well as functional by the end users. Now, there are a number of suppliers of safety equipment in Trinidad and Tobago. So you can tell us in the chat, how would you write specification for these safety boots if the requisitioner tells you what brand they want? I'm not going to give you the answer, but remember this guidance. Competition at the point of solicitation is what you want, as it helps you, the public body, get value for money. Additionally, what you are seeking to procure must be fit for purpose. Avoid the use of brand names, and if you must use brand names, consult the general guidelines as to the appropriate procedure. And finally, do not use lockout specifications. I know everyone wants to hear more about this, and we will get to that just in a later session. So we've gone through the who, the why, and the where. Let's look at the what. The what is very important as it feeds into your procurement strategy development. The what gets you data on product characteristics, supplier capabilities, and business practices or trends that surround the item. The what is also based on the organization's needs and unique circumstances, including technical and procurement capacity, as well as the value of the procurement activity. Such will determine the depth and focus of the research required. So in summary, start by deciding what are the areas you need information on, and the items on this slide are just a guide. It is by no way an exhaustive list. What these items represent are factors that would influence the development of your procurement strategy, methods and procedures, as well as your contract management strategy for the individual procurement activity. As mentioned earlier, market research will also help you to develop your high-level requirements and later on your specifications or technical requirements for your terms of reference. A reminder, it is important for the market research and analysis to be documented and placed in the record of procurement proceedings so that you can justify decisions taken in respect of what is available, who provides it, how it is sold, etc. Market research and analysis can take a lot of time, depending on the complexity of the procurement activity. So, this slide can be considered a nice cheat sheet for those of you with that responsibility. Understand why and what you are buying. Don't jump straight into the product or solution you think would work. It should be more about what is the problem you are trying to solve. Ask the right questions. Put aside your biases, rely on facts and expertise. Use a mix of research resources. Check sources. The information from one source may be incorrect, so have multiple sources. Identify key words and codes for your research. Start with a general query and drill down to the correct technical keyword. It is recommended that you use industry terms. For example, would you search for surveillance cameras or CCTV? Well, This was fun for me because the UNSPS codes identify both as separate products. What that tells me is that there is a difference. Next, identify the supply base and contractors. And this is important for the public sector, as not all companies are willing to do business with us. Consider available contract arrangements or contract management strategies. And we discussed this in session 1. We identified purchase orders, fixed price contracts, and framework agreements, to name a few. Another tip is to engage suppliers throughout the process. And this may be a tricky one for us to navigate, so I have a few tips that relate just to this. When a public body engages with suppliers, first of all, the public body ought not to pay the supplier for the information. Second, the public body should be aware of sales pitches in the guise of data. The supplier should not be allowed to influence the specifications in their favor. The public body should contact more than one supplier when conducting market research. And also, very importantly, remember to be guided by the ethical code of conduct and ensure that you have an appropriate relationship with the supplier. And my last tip, which is not on the slide, relates to the level of effort. Essentially, the effort put in should be commensurate with the size and complexity of the procurement activity. Consider this. Would it make sense to spend 1 full week gathering data for a once per year low value purchase, like desk diaries for internal use? On the flip side, would 1 full week gathering data be sufficient for the purchase of an air ambulance? Remember, the Act speaks to efficiency as one of its objects, and transaction costs can be directly correlated to efficiency. So, you've spent many hours conducting research in front of your computer, on the phone with experts, collecting trade magazines, meeting with end users, maybe even looking at samples potential suppliers were willing to provide. What do you do with all of this? We analyze. This may sound complex, but is actually very manageable. And I say this because at the last session, you were introduced to the procurement tools. Once you have collected the data for your specific procurement activity, you can use the tools to analyze. You are probably wondering where I'm going with this, since you already used Porter's 5 forces in your annual procurement planning process. Well, remember what Pastora said. You have strategic planning and operational planning. And yes, we used Porter's 5 forces in the strategic planning phase, but you can use these tools at the operational phase as well. When you understand the forces affecting the market for your specific procurement activity, you can adjust your procurement strategy, take fair advantage of a strong position, or improve a weak one, and avoid taking wrong steps in your procurement activity. And this is the benefit of applying Porter's 5 forces to your individual procurement activity. Another useful tool we discussed to help with the market analysis was the supply positioning model. We have mentioned a few times today about spending an appropriate effort on market research and analysis. Well, this tool will help you to determine which items require more or less effort depending on which quadrant the item falls into. You will recall from session 1 that this model is designed to assist in ranking your procurements in order of operational importance and the level of agency vulnerability if the supplier or contractor fails to deliver. When this tool is applied at the operational level, it should confirm what you gathered at the strategic planning phase. All things being equal, of course, you can then proceed to justify the recommended course of action to move your procurement forward. On this slide, you will see the supplier preferencing model. And just to refresh your memory, this model identifies how the supplier sees your business, and this is done by looking at the relative value of your account to the supplier and how attractive your business is to the supplier. Here, when applied, you will be able to identify an appropriate contract management strategy for your individual procurement going forward. To summarize, market research, when analyzed using the tools, would help in developing your procurement strategy and would help in justifying the decisions you take in moving your procurement activities forward. Now that you've done the research and analyzed the data, what can be done with this refined information? On this slide, these are some of the outputs and outcomes from market research and analysis. So we have the purpose of analyzing the data, and these are all outputs and outcomes, as I said. So I'm sure most of you have heard the regulator in many of his public engagements speaking about the 10% of public spend that is lost as a result of improper procurement activities or procedures. Well, knowledge is power, and in procurement, knowledge of what need you have to fill, how to fill that need, and where best to fill that need is one way to reduce some of the 10% wasted. The items on the slide show how market research and analysis is a valuable tool in the procurement process and would lead to value for money. I think it's time for a break, so I will hand you over to Tamara.
Thank you so much, Hafsa. Well, as Hafsa indicated, we will now take a 5-minute break. We will place a timer on the screen so that we all follow the same time. When we resume, we will go through market research report template and the market research and analysis for disposal of public property sessions. So see you back in 5. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I will now ask Devika to take you through the presentation.
Okay, so thank you, Tamara, and good morning, everyone. So while my colleague Hafsa would have provided you with a thorough understanding of the who, the what, and the whys of market research, this section of today's session aims to assist you in the actual completion of the market research report. So please pay careful attention as you will have your opportunity to complete your own market research report at the end of this session. So I hope everyone has their market research report template very close by so that you'll be able to easily follow me through this section of the presentation. Now, as you would see, the market research report template has 6 components. 1, the requirement information, and this describes the goods, works, or service that you intend to procure. The second component is the procurement history. Then we have what market research techniques and sources you intend to use. Fourthly, we have the description of the marketplace. And then we have the sources able, or your suppliers able to fulfill the requirements. And lastly, market research report template provides for an analysis, a summary analysis of your report. So we will now attempt to provide you with model responses for each of these components based on a proposed procurement activity. Now, let us assume that the Ministry of Procurement wants to purchase a company vehicle, as it would have outlined in its annual procurement plan for fiscal year 2023. The first section of the market research report requires that you identify your requisitioning department, which my colleague Hafsa would have described earlier on in our session. So based on our example, the requisitioning department would be the Human Resource and Administration. Next, the market research report requires the requisitioning department to identify officers involved in conducting the market research report. So we have Mr. Jason Pear, who's the Human Resource Manager, as well as Ms. Abigail Williams, who was a Senior Administrative Assistant, both assisted in conducting the market research report. Now moving on and continuing with the first section of this report, you as a requisitioner would be required to state the time frame in which your research was conducted, along with the estimated value of the contract based on your budget. So in this scenario, we conducted the market research report during the period August 2022 to September 2022, with an estimated contract value of $500,000. Now, the next section of the market research report looks at requirement description. And it is here that we will describe the goods, works, or service that the Ministry of Procurement intends to procure by answering the following 4 questions. What are the components or elements of the supply or service? Are they unique requirements? And for services, what are the critical performance requirements which the service must meet? And lastly, how does the industry sell the service, and are the requirements written in those terms? So we will now take a look at model responses for each of these 4 questions. Let us take a look at the first question under this section of requirement description. What are the components of the supply or service? Now, we have provided a sample response for our purchase of a company vehicle for the Ministry of Procurement. Now, the Ministry of Procurement is interested in procuring an SUV type vehicle for business use. And the features of the vehicle should include automatic transmission and engine capacity maximum of 2000 cc. We have minimum of 5 seats, fuel deposit of minimum of 50 liters. The color of the vehicle could be dark blue, gray, or black. And now this is not an exhaustive list or full description of the requirements for this purchase, as it really aims to provide you with an idea of the type of information required in this section. However, you will be required to be as detailed as possible in this section as the requisitioner in order to ensure your needs are met and value for money is achieved. The second question looks at, are there unique requirements for this purchase? And unique requirements in this case include one-of-a-kind functions or features that are specific to the purchase, which is required in order to satisfy the requisitioner's needs. So, based on our example of the purchase of the vehicle, unique requirements may include anti-theft system, which is a key immobilizer, automatic emergency braking system, or even a high-speed alert system. So question 3 of the requirement description looks at what are the critical performance requirements which the service must meet. Now, based on our example, the service aspect in the purchase of vehicle may include preventative maintenance and breakdown maintenance. So the critical performance requirements may include the type of items included, as well as the time it takes for the supplier to respond and provide both types of services. Question 4 of the requirement description looks at how does the industry sell the service, and are the requirements written in those terms? So generally, the industry would sell preventative and breakdown maintenance with standard service requirements. So based on our example, preventative maintenance would include oil changes, tire rotation, topping of fluids, and changing the brakes. Whereas breakdown maintenance would include maybe the provision of a replacement vehicle and time and cost it takes to effect repairs. Now we look at the procurement history, if there's any, for this procurement activity. So in the instance where there is no previous procurement history, you can simply state that this is a new procurement activity for the Ministry of Procurement, hence there's no procurement history for this good. Whereas where there was a previous procurement history, you'd want to include information such as the previous contractor's name and business size, contract number and dollar value, contract period of performance, the method of acquisition, and you could probably discuss if there were any organizational conflict of interest at that time. So the second section of the market research report looks at describing techniques and sources used during market research. And again, Hafsa would have highlighted the various sources of market research with you earlier on. So I will just identify the sources used by the Ministry of Procurement when it conducted its market research. So the ministry would have used professional journals, catalogs, and product literature from various suppliers, which detailed specifications, pricing, and support services available. It would have also engaged in internet research of 7 suppliers that provided this service and reviewed data available on the various websites. Another form of sources that the Ministry of Procurement would have used would have been telephone conversations with potential suppliers in order to obtain information as to what is available on the market. Now, the third section of the market research report looks at the description of the marketplace, prevalent business practices, or any findings from research. And it is here where we will utilize our procurement planning tools, which I'm sure most of you are very much familiar with by now. And these tools will be used to help us analyze the market for the purchase of the company vehicle. So let us take a look at a possible response for this section when describing the marketplace. So 1, based on our market research, we determined that the market structure for the purchase of the company vehicle can be described as monopolistic competition. Now that means there are many firms offering similar but not identical products in the market. Using the chiralgic matrix tool, the purchase of the company vehicle can be viewed as a leverage item with relatively high spend at $500,000 and low supply risk as there are many firms in the market. Next, we can analyze the market using the supplier preferencing model. And based on our analysis, it was determined that the Ministry of Procurement can be viewed as an exploitable customer by suppliers, where the value of the account is high, but the attractiveness of the account is considered low, as potential suppliers may be willing to lose this account due to issue with payment from this public body, or suppliers may think that it's too much effort in the required in the preparation of bidding documents for this one purchase. Next, if we analyze the market using supply positioning model, the purchase of the company vehicle would be considered non-critical. With low supply risk due to many suppliers in the market and low operational impact, as the lack of this good would not disrupt the organization's overall performance. Lastly, we analyze our market through the lens of Porter's 5 forces from the perspective of buyer power. And you, as a procuring entity, may have high buying power as there is high competition in the market with many suppliers for this good. Also remember that you can use other procurement tools like the SWOT and parcel analysis when analyzing your markets, as all of these tools can help you to determine how to approach the market when determining your market strategy. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term procurement strategy, your procurement strategy, we will be discussing this in one of our upcoming sessions. So as we would have mentioned in session 1, no one tool is perfect as it won't capture all circumstances. So by utilizing more than one tool, you'll gain a better understanding of the market to help you make a more informed decision. Now, some other information we may want to include in this section would be maybe payment terms. So we have the purchase of the vehicle will be paid in TT dollars by bank transfer to a designated bank account in the contract or purchase order. So the payment will be executed upon receipt of the vehicle. Now, this section of the market research report identifies the various suppliers that are able to fulfill your requirements based on the market research. So column 1, name and location of supplier. And based on our example, we would have analyzed the marketplace and obtained a short list of providers who meet our requirements from the list of suppliers registered in the procurement depository. Column 2, name and job title of representatives from each of the suppliers listed, and this is fairly self-explanatory. Column 3 requires that you state whether the supplier is pre-qualified or not. And in this scenario, let us assume that all suppliers would have already been approved in the procurement depository, which would mean that they all would have been pre-qualified. Column 4 and 5 requires that you provide the email address and telephone contact for the representative from each of the identified firms. So this section of the report looks at the market analysis summary, which is basically a summary of your entire market research report thus far, And it includes the description of the good, work, or service, the number of suppliers in the market, contracting norms, access to the service, and modes of payment. And lastly, as you would notice, the market research report has to be signed and dated by the requisitioner. So let us take a look at possible responses for each of these summary report points identified on the slide. And you may want to pay particular attention to this slide, as you may be requested to do this in your activity. So point 1 requires a summary description of the goods, works, or service, and would include basically a general summary of all the requirements as well as the unique requirements for this purchase. And we would have gone through this earlier on in the beginning part of the market research report. Point 2 of the market analysis summary looks at the number of suppliers in the market. So from our example, from the market research report completed over the period of 2 months, utilizing internet research, professional journals and catalogs, as well as telephone calls with suppliers, we have been able to identify 6 potential firms able to meet the requirements outlined. Point 3 looks at contracting norms, and this is in a single or multi-year contract. And based on our scenario, this could be maintenance service agreement for a 3-year period. Point 4 of the market analysis summary looks at access to the service. So in terms of preventative maintenance, this will be accessing the service Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. For breakdown maintenance, this may be a 24 hours, 7 days a week service, Monday to Sunday. Point 5 requires you state the modes of payment. And this is where we indicated that the vehicle will be purchased in TT dollars via bank transfer, and it will be paid upon receipt of the vehicle. Now, moving on to the next section of the market research report, we look at the section where the assigned procurement officer provides an independent review and summary of the market research report. So in our example here, the procurement officer provided a comment that was fairly simple, and it basically states that based on the market research conducted for the purchase of the company vehicle, it is imperative that following factors are considered in preparing the solicitation documents, which are requirements, terms and conditions of purchase, payment terms, which are required in order to obtain a product that is fit for purpose. Further, the procurement officer indicated that careful communication to and from potential suppliers should be managed properly. And these are just a few key areas we would want to pay attention to in carrying out this procurement activity. Now, the last section of the market research report, and yes, I said the last section, looks at conclusion and recommended procurement method by the procurement officer. And again, a simple response is provided here, which states that based on the information in the market research report by the requisitioning department, it is recommended that the Ministry of Procurement engage in a limited bidding type procurement method for the procurement of the company vehicle. And in this regard, invitations would be sent directly to the selected bidders identified. Right, so guess what? We have completed an entire market research report for the purchase of a company vehicle. I do hope that it was simple and clear enough for you to understand and follow, because in the next couple minutes, you will have the opportunity to complete your very own market research report. But just before we jump into this exercise, let us look at market research analysis from a different perspective. So have you considered if market research and analysis should be performed for the disposal process? Well, let me hand you over to Joy, who will help you answer this question.
Thank you very much, Deepika. Good morning, everyone. So just like market research for procurement, market research is also required in developing the disposal strategy, which aids in deciding on the most appropriate strategy for the disposal in question. Therefore, this slide illustrates a comparative view where we see for both areas. Firstly, in developing the strategy for procurement, it requires an assessment of the procurement need. And then for disposal, an assessment of the property identified for disposal, including its potential uses and value. So for both procurement and disposal, stakeholder analysis is required. But the main distinction when conducting market research for procurement is an analysis of the supply market to aid in developing the procurement strategy, as my colleague would have gone through before. However, for developing the disposal strategy, let's look at what is required when analyzing the demand market, which is essentially analyzing the potential buyers for the items identified for disposal. Therefore, in conducting the demand market analysis, some considerations is that the demand market considers potential buyers most relevant to meeting the disposal need is identified and its operation is described and analyzed. Also, demand market participants generally focus on meeting the needs of certain customer segments, for example, employees, recycling companies, etc. Additionally, identifying and analyzing the demand market most likely to meet the expressed need is essential for framing the disposal strategy. Further, the dynamics of the operation of the relevant demand markets are analyzed and understood in order to frame a strategy to effectively and efficiently meet the expressed need and to achieve best value for money. As such, the operation of the relevant demand market is defined through an analysis of the market structure, consideration of how buyers in the market compete with each other, assessing the nature and quality of the supply chain, considering the availability of substitutes, evaluating the buyer's perception of the disposal entity as a supplier, and assessment of political, socio-cultural, environmental, economic, regulatory, or other external factors that may impact on the operation of the market. Finally, it is also important to note that analyzing and documenting the operation of the demand market promotes transparency and integrity. And it is difficult to subvert a disposal action when the operation of the relevant demand market is documented as a basis for decision-making in framing a disposal strategy. Therefore, and in summary, as it refers to this disposal segment, market research is very important when it comes to analyzing the demand market, which is essentially analyzing the potential buyers for items identified for disposal as required in developing the disposal strategy. So thank you for your kind attention. I now hand you over to Mr. Mara Roy.
Thank you so much, Joy. At this time, we will take a 10-minute break. We will place a timer on the screen and resume shortly with a case study and assignment with Devika Singh. And with us, now we will continue on with the case study. So Devika.
Thank you, Tamara. All right, so welcome back, everyone. And I hope you are excited to do your assignment today. So now that we ask that you access your case study as well as the market research report in order to do your assignment. And just let us go through today's assignment, right? So you will be assigned one item to be procured as the Ministry of Public Procurement, where you will provide the market research summary and conclusion. And just to recap and refresh your memory, this would include you providing information as to the description of the good, work, or service that you will be procuring, the number of suppliers in the market, the contracting norms, access to service, and what modes of payment you will be using in your procurement. So before we place you into breakout rooms, I don't know if you would have been able to check the chat where we would have assigned items for each group to procure, right? So each group has already been assigned one item from the case study that you will be required to procure. So based on the assignment, you'll be given 30 minutes to complete this, right? And after the 30 minutes, you will then return to the main room where one designated member from your group will then present your answer for discussion, right? So at this point in time, we will be placing you and we're ready to go. Place you all into breakout groups. Good luck, everybody. We really look forward to reviewing your responses.